we're going to talk about why alternatives to civilization keep failing and what we can learn from that. First of all, what do I mean by failing? I don't mean at all failing as a game, but failing as a Civ alternative, which means that the game fails to become a serious competition for the Civilization franchise. Because usually, like these Civ alternatives, uh, they have like sales in the area of like 1 to 10% of Civ 6, much lower playtime per player. Uh, they tend to be fun, but like less fun than Civ. Tend to have like mixed reviews rather than very positive reviews, and are generally not really an improvement over Civilization and not likely to spawn a sequel. But this video is not about bashing any of these games, but about showing potential pitfalls when designing such a game. For me, there's not a singular reason why Civ alternatives fail, but rather a whole host of them. First of all, there's decision fatigue and tedium. Then there's problems with identification and identifying as the culture, empire, or nation that you're playing as. Then many of these games tend to have problems with diplomacy, balance, and age progression. And not every Civ alternative fails in every of these aspects. Some even excel in some of these aspects. And you might have different reasons why you think that a Civ alternative has failed to live up to the standards of Civ. So let's first talk about decision fatigue and tedium. Like whenever adding a new system to a game like Civ or like a Civ alternative game, we need to ask the question, does this system add choice or work? And a lot of this work that happens is either in placement decisions or in supply chain management. When it comes to placement decisions, many of the Civ alternatives that we've seen, be it Humankind, Millennia, or now Ara, they have a lot more placement decisions per city, where in Civ you would only place maybe like 10 districts at most per city, and build like 20 improvements. You have a lot more of that in the Civ alternative games. But it's not just more placement decisions that you do, but also a lot more options per decision, because you can build most buildings or improvements or whatever they're called in the respective games several times, rather than a district in Civ that you can only place one of each. Or when you build improvements in Civ, there's usually only 1 or 2, maybe 3 improvements that are like reasonable for a certain tile, whereas in the Civ alternative games there's usually a whole host of buildings or districts or whatever that you can place on a certain tile. And this leads to overall less impact per choice and thus more work per impact, and that makes it less fun and leads to less actually deep strategic thinking and more just work. And then the other aspect of some of the Civ alternative games that adds a lot of tedium is supply chain management. And both in Millennia and in Ara, it's like very cool in theory, and it is fun in the early game, but it becomes chaotic and not really possible to look over all of it like very quickly, and this also reduces the fun, and at some point makes these games like hard to keep playing them because it's just work and not a lot of strategic decision making. But both of these problems can be solved with automation or a good user experience. Like, for example, in a game like EU4, you have uh, in a large empire like hundreds of provinces, all with several like limited build slots. Uh, but the UI of EU4 allows you to very easily place all of these buildings. Uh, and then there's a problem with identifying as your empire. Like, when you play these games, does it really feel like you're playing the Romans? And does it really feel like it's your empire? And when you're interacting with the AI, are you playing against the Germans or are you playing against AI player number two? And there are like two approaches to creating this identification with the empires. And they can work on their own or together. One is like where your identity is chosen as a start. Uh, and for that to really work, this requires differentiation between the various empires that you can choose. Like, it's not enough for them to simply have a different name and a different color, and the city names are gonna be like different. It really requires mechanical differences, like gameplay differences, certain bonuses, unique units, unique buildings, but also visual differences in the style of cities or style of buildings of units, uh, to really make each playthrough feel different and let you really feel like you're playing the Romans, the Germans, the Russians. And the other approach to this, which is more of the approach that Millennia and Humankind have chosen, is an identity that's not chosen in the beginning but forged throughout the campaign. But in my opinion, for this to really work, it requires that all of these changes to your identity as an empire have to be earned and they have to be rewarding. And neither of these has really been the case in Humankind, and like a little bit in Millennia, but not all that much. Another aspect where Civ alternatives keep lacking is diplomacy. And I mean, I know that even Civ itself sometimes has problems with this, and making good diplomacy AI is hard. And especially when you add new mechanics to diplomacy that make diplomacy more complicated, this obviously becomes even harder. Uh, but sometimes the diplomacy in Civ alternatives is like really, really frustrating. For one, it's often very intransparent, and on the other hand, there's often like a sudden hostility from enemies, which is very much tied to this intransparency. Like, suddenly, an ally of many centuries becomes an enemy, and you can't really do anything about this, and you don't really understand why this is happening. It just does. And this is something that has happened to me in all of the Civ alternatives, and this is insanely frustrating. Uh, and another aspect which ties back to this aspect of identification is that the lack of identification of the other empires can also make diplomacy a lot less gratifying when you're not engaged in like a meaningful alliance with the British, or when you're not engaged in like an epic war against the German, but rather just playing against player 2 or the blue country. And then there's balance. Like, bad balance can really kill a good game, and it's quite hard to get right. And like, the only game that has like really gotten this right, in my opinion, is Civ. And Humankind is by far my favorite Civ-like, but it has like very bad balancing, and the balancing is probably my biggest gripe with Humankind. And if this wasn't the case, like, Humankind would be like a 9 out of 10 game. But like, some units are insanely overpowered, like, and they've changed the balancing over the years a bit. Like, it used to be that horse archers are insanely overpowered. Now it's the elephant platforms that are usually stronger than some units even in the next age. And it's just not fun when you're like doing everything right, but you just can't win against an army of 4 elephant platforms. And this like imbalance just makes the game not fun. And another thing that's like kind of true in all of the Amplitude games is that like inflation in Humankind hits way too hard, and that kind of makes like merchant gameplay, like economy focused gameplay, a lot less rewarding than it is in Civ. And finally, there's age progression. Like, Civ and also Humankind have tech trees, and I'm a big fan of tech trees, but Ara and Millennia have chosen to do tiered tech lists, where you have one tech to unlock the age, and then you can research any of the technologies of an age in an arbitrary order. And to me, this kind of takes away the fun of researching. You don't have this, like, this technology unlocks that, and that then unlocks the next thing, and this like looking forward to what happens next and next and next. And this just takes away some of what makes out this Civ typical just one more turn addictiveness. And like, I see why they had to do it in Millennia, because of the alternative ages, so it would have been hard to construct a tech tree that also works with the alternative ages. But in Ara, like, it just makes the game worse, in my opinion. So in conclusion, like, Civ likes are by no means bad. They're just not as good as Civ. And I don't think it's impossible to make a good Civ-like, or even like a Civ-like that's better than Civ. I just think that there are some pitfalls to consider, and I hope that this video maybe helps at some point someone to find the right decisions to make a game that's better than Civ. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you found this somewhat entertaining, and I'm very curious what your opinions are on why Civ alternatives have fared so much worse than the original. So please let me know in the comments, and have a nice day.